Clint, let's start with you. For all of the people who do not understand the significance of these leaked messages, denying that this was classified information, can you please talk about why there are so many national security officers and officials who've rejected that claim?
Yeah, it's a little bit confusing, Charles. I think the key point is two major breakdowns. One, what is classified versus not classified? It's not well articulated, and no one really understands. And then the second part is why wouldn't government communication devices, the systems, be used for that kind of discussion? That would be the norm. In this case, what you see is a journalist who gets put into a group chat. That's only really possible usually if someone's using their own personal devices or personal applications, and it's not on an application that's monitored by the government or controlled by the government. Signal is a private or a private app or a private company. That's an app that you could get on the App Store. Any of us could download it. And that's not really under government control. So there's two parts to it. One, they'd want to, as the U.S. government would want to control the information on any of those discussions between officials. The second part is always about the devices, the networks, and where all that content is. And that's really to the judge's orders today. Usually any content amongst government officials and the way that it was displayed in that Signal chat would be done on government devices, government networks, so we could ensure that it's safe.
Now, Peter, I've heard what Clint just said, but at the same time, listen, we're talking about messages that had information about targets, about weaponry, about the times of attacks. If that's not classified information, what does count as being classified information?
Yeah, I think we're getting all wrapped around definitions. The point is it information that should be out there on a commercially available app that clearly could be hacked by our enemies? We know the Russians and the Chinese are out there trying to get exactly this kind of information. We know that this kind of information, had it been out there in the public sphere someplace, could have been potentially useful to the targets of this attack. Had they known what time it was coming, obviously that would have been advantageous to them. So, whatever the legal specifics are, obviously that's important. We shouldn't lose sight of the larger question here. Now, what's really interesting in some ways is, of course, you have a Trump administration that's defining secrecy however it chooses to. In this case, they're saying, hey, basically not classified, not a big deal. At the same time, this administration went to court this week to say that information about a migrant flight to El Salvador that's already taken place, that's already landed, it's already been shown on video by El Salvador, is so secret that they can't even tell a judge about it. So their choice of what's secret, it really depends on where they stand and where they see their own interests.
We've learned from NBC News that in a separate incident, a Department of Homeland Security employee has been placed on administrative leave and has been told that she'll likely lose her security clearance after accidentally sharing unclassified details of an upcoming ICE operation with a journalist in late January. Carol, is this a harsher punishment than any of the individuals involved in this scandal? What does that tell you about how this administration is going about looking around classified information, if you will?
There's so much selectivity going on. I mean, at the top of the hour, Charles, you rightly played some of what Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, had to say. She's selectively deciding that what Hillary Clinton had on an email server was classified, but what these guys were sharing about, and let's not play around with the words, this was a war plan. This was bombs about to drop. We don't have to fight about the words. This is an attack, a war, a plan, targets and strikes, locations, fighter jets named, very, very specific. The selectivity of saying that what Hillary Clinton had in her email was so classified and this wasn't is kind of ridiculous. Hillary Clinton's lawyers at the time tried to claim that none of her materials were classified. Well, they said not marked classified. But these materials are national defense information. End of story. Both of these things we're dancing around the fact that these are things critical to our national security. And I remember back then when Hillary Clinton's server was discovered and the Inspector General began investigating, I remember military sources coming to me and saying, I put a guy up for court-martial because he shared this information on a non-secured platform with one of his generals. He used the wrong non-class, site to send this material. That made it dangerous. It could have put people in harm's way. And this person was now going to be dishonorably discharged and punished. And that is, a sad state of affairs, that we have certain standards for one group of people and another standard for this. And by the way, Charles, there automatically would have, should have, still should be an investigation, a counterintelligence investigation to determine how this happened. And that's what normally the FBI would do here. And obviously, Pam Bondi is telegraphing to us that that is not going to happen.
Carol, you made an excellent point. We heard about Hillary Clinton and a private email server. We heard about Joe Biden in terms of documents in his garage. But we did not hear Attorney General Pam Bondi mention anything about the federal indictment related to classified documents that were allegedly stored in Mar-a-Lago. So when you talk about selectivity, there's that. Peter, I just have to ask, why isn't there more of a conversation around what else could be out there? It seems to me that there is a presumption that this is the first and only time that this has been something that has occurred, a private conversation detailing confidential information or quasi-confidential information on Signal. Why isn't there more concern about what else could potentially be out there?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I mean, if they did, when somebody gets caught doing something that's not good, it's usually not the first time, right? It just happens to be the first time that they're caught. In this case, it happens to be the first time they're caught because they accidentally added a journalist. Otherwise, we might not know what they've been doing for 8 weeks up until now. And nobody's bothered to say, and as Carol said, it doesn't look like anybody's going to bother to investigate. If they did it for this, it's a good question of what else they've done, because they obviously don't see Signal as an unsecure platform for this kind of conversation, even though most national security experts would tell you it is. I talked to people from the previous administration. They're astonished by this. They said, we would never do that. Did we use Signal? Yes, but for scheduling things. Are you going to be in the office tomorrow? Yes, that kind of thing. Never for sensitive conversations, much less potentially classified military conversations. So you're right. I think that it's probably not, at least it's reasonable to ask the question as to whether or not this is the first time, and this is why investigations are useful. It may be that an investigation would say, okay, no charge is necessary here. They didn't mean to do it. Obviously, it was perhaps careless. There doesn't seem to be harm done in this particular instances. That was essentially the conclusion with the Hillary Clinton and the Joe Biden cases. But that's the reason why you have an investigation, to come to those determinations. Pam Bondi makes clear in this case, even though it's so clearly sensitive information out there in the public domain, that there's not even going to be an investigation.
Clint, let's go to court. And I'm just saying that because I'm a lawyer and I like to do that. It's comfortable for me. Judge Boasberg is overseeing the case that is now accusing top officials of violating the Federal Records Act by keeping this attack leak on Signal. And Trump has baselessly called this judge highly conflicted. He started already with the attacks. And now Attorney General Pam Bondi has also attacked the judges for blocking parts of Donald Trump's agenda. Watch this and let's talk about it.
These judges obviously cannot be impartial. They cannot be objective. They are district judges trying to control our entire country, and they are trying to obstruct Donald Trump's agenda.
Pam Bondi is, in effect, the chief law enforcement officer of the federal government. When you see her make a statement like that on national television, what type of message does that send?
I think it's a little confusing because the whole point of a judge is to judge based on the law. Let's just take this case with the Signal chats. Anything with government records, government communications, that's everything from signing into logs, going into the White House. Any material or communication between top officials would be recorded. That would be recorded in such a way that it could be used just to know what happened, if nothing else. How the judge is being biased by just basic interpretation of that law, I don't understand. This is something that is recorded all the time. Just imagine, by the way, the bin Laden raid. There's always the famous picture of the Situation Room where you see all of the officials there in a secure room watching that attack. go down. Why did they do that? They went there to keep the communications entirely secretive and controlled. There's a record of that. That was one permitted picture that was done in that way, and it was to account for what was happening on that day. All that basically has been undone. And I think the key part of this, just for me, looking at everything that's going on, is there were a lot of cell phones with temporary messages on them. I would be surprised if those records could even be recovered. I'm not sure how they would. One of the things that Signal would claim as one of its features is the messages are very difficult to get to. So there's two parts of that. Difficult to get to for the users, but is it difficult for a nation state like China or Russia to target a phone and recover those messages? So we would want to have copies of those messages so that we know what actually happened. In the case of this strike, what if something different had happened? It wasn't a successful mission, is the way the administration claims. We would definitely want to know why that might be. And this is where some of those communications might reveal if there was some sort of misstep along the way. So I think the judge is interpreting the law, which is very straightforward in a very straightforward way.